Hello and welcome. Some 80 writers from the diaspora were here in Yerevan this past week for a conference, and one of those conference participants was a playwright, filmmaker and writer, Vaughan Pilikian from the UK. Welcome, Vaughan. We have to start off by explaining that you're sunburned because you spent 3 days on Arakats. Talk about that before we talk about why you're here.
Yeah, well, I was determined on this visit to spend some time in the sort of heartland, if you want to call it, of Armenia itself, so I thought where better than to actually ascend Aragats, and it was really quite an experience. Yeah, 3 days of trekking up into the crater. I had this notion that I really wanted to spend a night in the crater of the volcano, which I did, and which was a really bizarre, quite moving experience actually.
How were you moved? In what way was it bizarre?
What you don't see, you know, there's this story about Gregory the Illuminator seeing a lantern descending from heaven into Aragats, and that this gave him the idea to found the Armenian church. I don't know if I'm getting the details exactly right there, but you do see things, especially towards nightfall, inside the crater, because you're so high and the clouds are moving and the sun is descending and the beams of light are catching the peaks in different ways that are really quite remarkable, quite alien when you set them aside what you see.
So it was a fascinating experience, I'm sure.
It was amazing. Yeah.
So you're here because the Writers' Conference. What did you hope to get from the conference? What was the mission and what happened?
Well, the idea of kind of making sense of this Armenian element in my background is quite compelling to me. You know, I mean, I hardly, while British society is very open and egalitarian, I mean, having a name like Pilikian and coming from the background that I do just means that one never feels entirely part of the world one's born into. So I sort of, you know, tugged on endlessly into sort of understanding more deeply through connecting with other people. It just happens to be in the field of writing. It could be anything, but who share maybe this particular.
And were you able to connect with these writers who write in non-Armenian languages?
I mean, to some extent, yes. To some extent, it was possible. But I do feel that the conference made me realize there's still quite a gulf, I think, between a certain kind of Armenia, dare I say it, and my world, which I suppose has to be considered the West. I think there's a greater abyss maybe between the two than I initially maybe expected.
So, but the conference was a way to perhaps try to assess the abyss and maybe try to.
Yeah, I think it was that, and I mean, you know, in the end, these events are all about the people you meet, and there were some very interesting people at the conference. I felt that to some extent, you know, we needed the conference could have done with more clarity. I mean, we need to know what the purpose of these events are. I always think, you know, what's the purpose of any gathering of? Because it could be writers, it could be filmmakers, and so on. What are they doing together? Sometimes it's just like a big party, or perhaps whatever the opposite of a party.
So after the conference, that was still unclear as to.
A little bit in my mind, yeah, to some extent. But
what would you have done that would be different, so that when they're planning the 6th annual Writers' Conference of Armenian origin, what would you like to see?
Well, I applaud their endeavor, but I suppose the question for me has to be, what is the purpose? If you answer this question, I think you can answer any question. What is the purpose of what we're doing? Why are we doing it? Why are we gathering together? I mean, it's a difficult question. I don't think people ever ask it very strongly in these sorts of occasions, and that just means that you end up with a sort of a vague, wishy-washy conclusion. You know?
And a lot of issues you discuss as a writer, a lot of the themes, obviously they need a harsh look in the mirror for you to be able to be introspective and create art. What are some of the themes that you address through your writing? Let's start with poetry.
Wow, I mean, that's such an enormous question. It's just very, very difficult to answer. Poetry is a very difficult thing for me because I don't understand what I write very clearly, and that's the reason to write it. To some extent, it's true in everything that I do, but I think that I don't like work that can be elucidated very easily by the person who makes it, because then I wonder why not just write an essay or I mean, we, you know, in England we have a very successful history of the last 20 years of art, but a lot of the art that's been made, you know, that has gone international and become hugely financially lucrative, successful, is highly conceptual in the sense that you can write down what it's doing in a few sentences, and you get a pretty good impression of what it is. Nothing should be that way. Nothing you make should be that way.
How many books have you published so far?
4, but they don't really go together, so I don't know how that has worked really.
But they're available on Amazon, some of your poetry books, so people
Yeah,
can have access to them.
I've only published 2 collections of poetry, but they are still out there somewhere. Minutely small editions read by very few, I think, and but you know, like my favorite, probably my favorite film director, Andrei Tarkovsky, said, "A book is a deed. You have to do it."
So do you continue doing it? Do you continue to write and hopefully collect another?
One does. I mean, you never know what's going to happen. You never know what you're going to do next, or I don't. I've never had a career plan. I've just sort of tried to live my life and seen where it's taken me. I suppose that sounds rather romantic, but it's more been an act of necessity. It's just the way things have gone. I mean,
so tell me about theater. When did you first get into playwriting, and tell me about
the theater. Everything in my life that I try to do usually goes wrong. But it's the things that sort of I don't really put much effort into that suddenly magically come alive. So the theater just turned up. I didn't try to start making theater. It sort of came upon me. And I've only made this one play in the last 10 years. I've been focused on theatre, but this play that I made is very significant to me because I'm trying to develop a new language. I suppose that's one thing I'm always trying to do. Is I don't like the settled languages that are forms of cinema, theatre, prose, poetry, whatever, fall into.
Are they outdated? Do we not identify with them?
I don't know what it is, but I think that particularly with theatre and film, because they're the performing arts, we have a lot of tropes that we fall into. You know, we have things like narratives and characters and scenarios, heroes, villains, and so forth, and it's very dull. And the theatre is the worst of it. You know, I never go to the theatre because all you get is someone, you know, ranting a received text at you. And to me, this is just a dead medium. So how do you reinvent that medium? How do you say something new? How do you make it breathe again? Because in a way, theatre actually, I think, is at the core of being alive. I think it's the most primordial art form because it is just people looking at people. It's not people looking at paintings or hearing words. You're looking at people on stage. And there's something incredibly powerful about that we never see, because as soon as you put words into it or learned dialogue, you set a screen up into the experience. I just want to take that screen away. You know, that's the main motivation, and bring it alive again.
Your teleplay or theater that was recorded, Lepers Colony, what was that about?
Let me be clear about this. Is definitely not a teleplay. It's a play. Pure and simple, and it's a pure play. It exists in a filmed form, but the film of it is a betrayal of it. That's very important. It renders it impure. The play itself was, I set out to try to make the first play that had ever been made and the last play that man will ever perform at the same time. So you can imagine what a thing that was to try to do. I think we came somewhere near to achieving it, but not by dint of me, more by dint of the people I worked with, because the performers in the piece were quite extraordinary people.
Let's take a look at Lepers Colony, the betrayal of Lepers Colony, because it's on tape. Here's the clip. Lepers Colony by Vaughan Pilikian. Vaughan, what else are you working on right now?
Well, this was partly my trip to Aragats was what I might call location research. I'm obsessed by the notion of trying to make a film in Armenia that comes out of the landscape. I've not seen the Armenian film that does that. There have been films made that have used the landscape in an interesting way, but there is such an extraordinary force and power to the landscape here, the volcanic shape of it, that I really want to try to make a project that rises up out of that. And I mean, this would be a wonderful opportunity to work with, to bring my expertise and my knowledge of the British film business into Armenia and to exchange that way. It's a great dream of mine. It's extremely difficult to do for someone of my vanishingly small reputation in both countries. But it is my hope.
Do you have a starting point as to what you'd like to see? Is there a storyline? I
Yeah,
know you don't
there
believe in
is.
traditional narrative.
No. But in this case, there's something quite traditional. I'm drawing on. Well, the project is about the Greek myth of Sisyphus. The man who had to roll the boulder at the top of the hill
And have it rolled back down
again.
at night.
Yeah, not because, and I don't believe this is a Grecian myth. I believe it's a global myth. I think it's a very primitive, early, perhaps even Near Eastern, let's say, more than Greek notion. And it really, to me, it speaks of the birth of civilization, which is, in a sense, that's what I think you could see in the Armenian landscape, and I think that it would be very interesting to bring this myth in its pure original form, into the land as we see it here, and the sky and the wind and the rock. I mean, it's so powerful. And why is this not on the cinema screen? I mean, it would be mesmerizing, and this is a nice way of doing it. I'm generally not interested in urbanites and sort of, and emotions and everyday life. I'm more interested in something more primordial, and I think this is a way into that material.
So is the Sisyphus, as the rock, the pushing of it up the hill, your attempt to discover your Armenian ethnicity, or is it your attempt at art?
Oh, well, it could be either. Why not? It could be the reason the Bible and the myths as we have them survive is because we don't really know what they mean, but we can't let them go. So, anything well made is open to 1,000 uses. It's just like a wooden wheel. If it's a perfect circle, you could attach it to anything and the thing will roll,
Vaughan, fascinating dialogue. We look forward to reading your poetry and seeing your plays and watching your movies. And hopefully you'll come back and visit and make that movie here in Armenia soon.
Thanks, Paul. It's been a real pleasure.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thank you at home for joining us. We'll see you next time on CivilNet.